old school. Today's R&B. With a smooth touch of jazz. You're listening to In Touch Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Oguntade, and I'll be guest hosting for you today for Mr. Dale Green on Issues and Answers. Today we have with us the lovely, I just respect her and love her so much. She tells me to call her Aunt Shelly sometime, but that's none other than Attorney Michelle Ligon of L Resources today with us in the studio. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Gina.
Oh, it's a
For
pleasure.
this for quite a while now. I appreciate Dale affording us the opportunity as well.
Exactly. I hope I do him well and make him proud in his absence. So today we're going to discuss some of the issues that we honed in on last week when I was here with him and during my interview, in particular affordable housing and just some of the different aspects that are surrounding that issue, local, state, the citizen side of it, and just kind of what we need to be aware of and where it's going at this point. So with that, I first of all want to give one correction from last week. Mr. Green touched on how are sports affecting the housing issue in St. Petersburg, and I spoke about how the displacement of one of the public housing, I don't want to say projects, but we know what they're called, public housing developments. Thank you. Exactly. Well, for our guests that keep it a little bit on the more labor side, we're going to go with that. They understand that a lot more. But I wanted to say that it was called Royal Park, not Royal Palm. We know Royal Palm is a cemetery for those who have their final resting place there. So I did want to make that one correction before we get started. So going right into it, what is it that you do and what is your role at this point in the affordable housing situation?
Right. Well, to start, most of my work is in the area of development of the housing. And if that is... Okay,
lean into the mic a little more.
Most of my work is in the area of the development itself. So we identify properties, whether they're in existence or properties that have not yet been constructed and need to have major renovation, whether that is an improvement to have special accommodations maybe for handicap or to have special housing requirements for returning veterans and that sort of thing, seniors as well. And so what we do is to try to identify those areas throughout the country that are underserved. When I say the term underserved, they are underserved in a number of capacities. One is housing capacity. So when you look at the needs hierarchy, on the very bottom of that, in terms of Maslow's needs hierarchy, what we have to survive, to sustain, to thrive. At the very bottom of that is housing. We need some place that is safe, sanitary, and sustainable. And that's been a challenge for us because as a country, we kind of went off the rails for a while. Right. For a number of the decades that precede your birth, certainly, and mine as well, to a lesser extent, we stopped building. We got to a point after World War II where we had a lot of returning vets, and we had a lot of changes in terms of the type of housing that we needed. Originally, we started off as a single-family home type of country, and then we went into multifamily. Then we took multifamily into the air and started building sky rises, not high rises, but sky rises. And so in some of the major cities, you see that. So I became attracted to real estate for that reason because it came along at a time when housing was at a premium, meaning that we had an insufficient supply for the number of people who required housing. Some other dynamics came into play at that time period, and that's the number of persons per household. Originally, it started out where families, the nuclear unit, mother, father, and children, lived together. Then through a number of factors that happened socially, we began to take on extras. So we moved to a period where we had elders living with us. We moved to a period where costs precluded independent living for even adult children. And so the size of the family unit, the dynamic of the family unit began to change. And as a result of that, we had to have the type of housing that would accommodate that. So at that period of time, you saw a lot of changes in terms of design, which would accommodate separate but under the same roof type of housing opportunities, au pairs, garage apartments, if you will. Those types of units where um, the main part of the house stayed intact, but it had an additional and usually privately accessed unit. So we went through that through the 50s and 60s and stopped that and then began to do more along the lines of smaller homes, more of them, and also to expand the capacity in terms of the land area for multifamily housing. And that's where we find ourselves today. We find ourselves in a situation where we've got more need than supply.
Wow, that's very interesting. And thank you for that historical sketch on what the housing market has looked like over the decades. So, where we are currently, we still seem to have a premium need. And then you throw the affordability aspect on top of it. So, what have you been doing currently to basically bridge those two together and make it accessible to everyone?
One of the things that we're doing is to look at the area plan. Every 5 years, cities, counties, and states look at the landscape and they make a determination of what elements need improvement, either a change in terms of a total change or an enhancement to something that is existing, still working, but not as with as much fluidity as we'd like to see. So with the comprehensive plan, we determine density, how many people live in that particular area, what types of accommodations are there in terms of all the various elements of running a city, if you will. Fire and safety, transportation. We look at the environment and what we're doing in terms of water supply and sanitary sewer types of arrangements. And we also look at the airspace as well. And that's something that a lot of us tend to forget about. We think about airspace in the context of air travel, but we also look at airspace in terms of view corridors. So as you look at the number of high-rise buildings that are going up, believe it or not, engineers and architects are also charged with responsibility of making sure that in doing a more intense construction, the view corridors are not impaired. And when you start to get high in the air, you would think that that would diminish as something to look at. But if you can appreciate what the landscape was in Tampa, what the landscape was in St. Petersburg, Clearwater, even out to Sun Key in those areas, there are market changes that have been made over the past 30 years, and it's not getting any better. There are more of us, demand is higher, and the demand by demographic is very distinct at this point in time, and that's where the definition of affordable housing comes into play. In terms of what you look at for affordability, the guideline is very broad. It goes from people who have no ability to provide for their own housing needs at zero income, all the way to people that can expense 120% of their household income for rents. And you think, well, how can they spend more than 100% of that?
Good credit.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Not credit so much as credit.
Exactly.
We have to go there.
Okay.
Meaning that we're spending more than what we have in the way of assets. So affordability has a very wide range of things, and therein lies the rub in terms of what we're doing right now. The family that can afford to pay 120% of their household income on a monthly basis towards rent, by many definitions, by most definitions, is not considered needy. Formally.
Understandable.
That's not the story today.
I totally understand that. Before we go any further, let's give the call-in number for those of you who might want to participate in today's show. And that number is 813-444-9588. Again, the call-in number is area code 813-444-9588. Now, going back to this idea of affordability and the broad spectrum that it covers, I would assume that most of the people fall probably in the bottom, I won't even say 50 percentile, maybe 40 to 35 percentile.
Give you a little bit more definition in that category. Public housing is typically for individuals that have 60% of their household income a month available for rents.
Wow.
So it goes up to 60%. So most of the public housing projects, as we used to call them, that you see throughout the country have that as the benchmark, particularly those housing projects that are done under HUD.
Okay.
Which is the House Urban Development
Yes.
Corporation. Came out of the Department of the Interior. clear back in the 1930s. And in fact, the housing in the state of Florida, public housing, was something that was kind of late to come. Um, the first housing project, if you will, was in Jacksonville. The very second was over in St. Petersburg, Florida, in a complex that's now called Jordan Park Apartments.
Hmm. Yes, that's a very hot topic right now. I know I touched on that a little bit last week as well in my interview with Mr. Green, and how the new development or the new Jordan Park is supposed to come into fruition, and it won't house as many people or families as it now does, and so that's going to be a problem because where are all the people going to go who now currently reside there?
On contraire,
Could you expound on that a little bit?
I'd
for
be
me?
delighted.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I want to also add a small footnote. I'm speaking here today as Michelle Ligon.
Okay,
All the handles, attorney, whatever you, developer, all of those handles come into play in a single pot when you're talking about getting people someplace that's safe and sanitary to live. A bit about Jordan Park. Jordan Park is an apartment complex that was first built in 1939.
oh wow.
It was built as a HUD public housing complex. The number of units that are currently in utilization there is 206.
Okay,
An additional 29 units, including those that have been torn down, will be added to Jordan Park on completion of a renovation project they have
Okay.
going on right now.
Oh.
So, with that, it will actually be larger. The challenge has been that during a major rehabilitation project that was done in 2001, there was a major remodel of most of the complex. That generated 206 mixed sized units and 30 units that were specifically designed to accommodate seniors.
okay,
And those buildings were not totally rebuilt, but they were substantially remodeled. And what that simply means is that you've got 9 buildings that are 80 years old at this point.
wow. That's still in
That's,
great need.
that's a lot. But
That's a lot.
on completion of the remodeling and the new construction, there'll be a total of 266 units. And so that's a pretty good number. They're being done under the St. Petersburg Housing Authority, and those units will accommodate seniors as well as families, and they will accommodate people who meet the public housing guideline or benchmark, if you will, 60% and less of annual and monthly calculated income.
Okay, well, thank you for the correction on that. How come there's been such a hot discussion about Jordan Park and what it's supposed to be when it's totally renovated and the additional units are added? I've heard a lot on both sides, and so I just really want to get an insight, in your opinion, idea of what is really the hot issue, because I have seen some people and heard some discussions that not kind of pleased with where it's going to go and what it's going to become.
Well, I think there are fair comments on all sides of the debate. Those that are based on the truth, I'm most fond of.
Of course.
And
I
those,
second that.
we second that motion and that emotion as well.
Exactly.
I think that, unfortunately, as a people, we tend to speak from the basis of what had happened,
Mm,
as in something past, as if it were present.
okay.
We also speak in the context of what he said, she said, as opposed to what I read.
Exactly.
I'm a fan of reading
Exactly.
and counting and writing and spelling and talking on my own. That way I get to determine the factual basis for things that are being said. And when you're dealing with change, people tend to hear selectively what they need to hear to validate their position. And that's what's happened. We've made diligent effort to try to get the truth into the public domain through public meetings, through media. And as a result of that, people still tend to hear what they want to hear, and they tend to believe what they want to believe. I'm prayerfully, prayerfully awaiting that time when they can actually see
Okay.
the truth, and it manifests itself in terms of totally refurbished and or new constructed properties in that community. The participation in that process is fairly complicated. and not everybody follows it through from start to finish. And so I think that's the basis for some of the concerns. A lack of information or incomplete information or information that, hopefully not purposefully so, has been skewed to put a certain perception out there. The truth is that we have a very serious need for affordable housing all over the Bay. What we haven't done is to keep pace with providing for that need at all levels of income. In the issue of housing, the turnkey is not so much race as it is finance.
Socioeconomic division.
Socioeconomic division. And with that, you do have to temper it with a harsh truth, which is that the access to finance, the acceptance in terms of those circles for developing this type of housing are fairly restrictive.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll be right back with Issues and the Answers. Please stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Donald L. Dowers Jr., your motivational guru. This is the DLD Motivational Moment. One darn second. America, since 2017, is suffering from a serious hiccup. 9/11 is seriously overused in a distasteful manner. Every day the cops are calling on an innocent person of color. It amazes me that America has come down to this. A person of color becomes a person of interest. Waffle House, the dorm, Starbucks is a few. This is not the lunch counters, sit-ins of the 1960s. 2019, harassed simply for being black and proud. Hold on one darn second. This has been the DLD Motivational Moment. Pre-order my new book, Motivational Moments, at DLD282002 at yahoo.com or 813-394-5875.
Been in a car crash? Call Ricky. Don't know what to do? Ask Ricky. We will connect you with a lawyer and doctor experienced in auto accident injuries. Call Ricky at 844-361-7425. After an auto accident, you have 14 days to seek medical attention. You may be in pain, so call Ricky, ask Ricky for your best options. 844-361-7425. Call Ricky, ask Ricky is a legal and medical referral service. The lawyers in our network pay to receive referrals.
Welcome back to Issues and Answers. Again, on the show today, we have Attorney Michelle Ligon, and we're talking about affordable housing. Now, just before the break, she was giving us some background on a lot of the issues with accessibility from the citizen side. But before we go into that any further, let's go back and kind of fill in the gaps on the big picture of the whole affordable housing topic. So can you expound on some of those things for us?
Absolutely. One of the things that we do in our comprehensive plans, which is something that I mentioned earlier in the segment, is to plan for the growth and development of a city. And we do that at the city level, county, state, and then it rolls all the way up to the federal level. And it's based in substantial part on census information. So you've heard a lot of talk about that. And so I want to make it very, very clear that a lot of the scuttle that you hear on TV, on the radio, and see over the internet is related to census. How many people do we have? What are their financial resources? And what can we do to level the playing field between them? Well, throughout the ages, there's not been a whole lot of enthusiasm for leveling the playing field. It's an age-old challenge that goes all the way back to Greek and Roman times. And the issue of privilege is one that hit the hot seat just yesterday. And so let's look at the disparity between residents of the city, residents of this county, the state, and on a federal level. So census is very, very important, and it's a key factor. With regard to the census, those numbers are collected officially for the purposes of the federal record every 10 years. And every 10 years, we determine how many people are in this country. And the allocation of resources, whether they are members of Congress or whether they are resources for housing or otherwise, education, or the general welfare of the republic, all of that ties to how many people, where they're located, and what their needs are in terms of socioeconomic strata. And as a result of that, it's very, very important to have an accurate count. You've heard a lot of conversation about that in terms of who's eligible for what and where it should go, when it should go. Heads up.
Heads up. Yes.
As your generation says, heads up.
Heads up.
Be
Yeah.
counted.
That's true.
Be counted, because the allocation of money is a function of how many people, where they're located, and what their needs are.
Let me jump in for just a second. One of the things that I really hit home on really precisely last week was the census. And we're in 2019. So we have an upcoming census next year. But the preparation for that actually starts now. Some of us probably heard the advertisements on the radio or maybe even television at this point that are advertising jobs if you want to get involved on that level, or just letting you know, be aware, be on the lookout for, and be counted. And so that's something that I really want everyone to participate in. And we say go vote, but extremely important as well before you even get to the voting booth is to be counted.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You're absolutely correct on that. And as a result of being counted, then you have a much greater likelihood of being included in the allocations.
Exactly.
Because if
That's
you're not
true.
counted, it affects everything from the count in a particular precinct, which can impact or sway a vote one way or the other. You've heard the term gerrymandering.
Yes.
And that means when the lines are drawn along population lines.
Mm-hmm.
But if the population isn't properly accounted for, then it's askew, which means, pronounced another way, there could be problems. There could
Putting
be
it
problems.
nicely, there
Putting
could be
it
problems.
nicely.
Okay. I understand that. So with that, definitely everyone, please go out and make sure that you are included in the census this year. It's very important, really now more than ever going forward, because there are some major decisions that will be made on the federal level all the way down to your local community that will be based on population this year and next year and going forward. And not just for the next 10 years, but really our plans are made probably 20 and 30 years out. So every census is very important, but I think this one, like none other, would be more important for us going forward and looking at what our new tomorrow will be, our new country, the leadership we'll have later on, even on an international level. We have some major things going on around the world that are going to impact us here. So we need to definitely get out, be counted, and make sure that we all have a fair say in what going forward. So now going back to filling in some of those gaps that you talked about before we got off onto the census part of things, the census is important to be counted, but with those numbers, what do we do? What is actually decided upon?
As I kind of mentioned before, census is responsible for determining representation in Congress. How many votes you have on a particular issue in turn determines.
I think we have a caller.
Okay.
Thank you for calling in. And what is your question today?
Hey, is it possible that some of the census is actually missing a great majority of African Americans? I have a daughter that's a millennial, and one of the things that she said was, "Daddy, I don't believe that they're actually counting blacks in the country. I think they're undercounting us, and we're getting misrepresented." I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think you're having a little technical difficulties with your headphone, but I will kind of summarize the question and repeat it. The caller, the gentleman, he didn't give his name, but he said that he was speaking to his daughter, who was considered a millennial, and her concern, which I'm very glad she's even concerned, considering she's in the millennial generation, is that are they accurately counting? And with the information given, even when you do get counted or you fill in the applications and turn them in, she doesn't think they're accurately counting everyone, in particular African Americans, and of course other minorities as well. So that's kind of what his question was.
Well,
And I mean, we would hope so, but if you want to expound on that.
Well, absolutely. And what we have to do is A, show up, B, make sure that we're counted when we show up, and then C, make sure that the accountability translates over into the allocation of resources. Resources go across the board, from representation within the State House to Congress, and that then in turn translates into money and other types of resources, which would be information, the quality of life issues involving transportation patterns, what's being appropriated as far as road and bridge improvement monies and that sort of thing. So how do you pay attention to that? Well, you can make sure that you are once you're eligible, registered to vote. Your census information sets up the precincts and it sets up in terms the impact that you can possibly have in terms of voting. If you have representation, chances are that your voice is going to be heard most loudly. You notice how things go in terms of bills and various provisions that are being put forward for consideration. You hear a lot of testimony. You hear people going up to speak on behalf of it. The more people you have representing your interest in the things that are concerning to you, the more likely it is that attention and resources will be directed to that interest.
Power in numbers.
Absolutely. There's power in numbers, and there's also power in being informed about what those numbers mean and how they're being interpreted is a very big issue for us now. The interpretation of what those numbers mean in a highly populated urban area versus what they mean in, the Great Plains states is markedly different. But yet we have universal policies that are being considered and put into practice that don't reflect those material differences. And it's difficult to do. So staying engaged to make sure that the interpretation fits the circumstance is something that we can do on an individual basis and be just as impactful. We have a way of communicating now over the internet that gets us there. We don't physically have to be in Washington, D.C. or in Tallahassee to be heard. And I would encourage everybody to speak up, stay woke.
That was
and
my
speak
word
up.
from last week. Stay woke. This show is evidence of that. I'm sure some people are listening outside of the Tampa Bay area. So exactly right on point what you're speaking of today. So other than showing up, being counted, registering to vote, I don't know if there are actually any catch-all ways to know. You just kind of have to have faith and trust that the entities that are powered with that particular position are going to do their job. We're having a little technical difficulties with her headset, so give us a second on that. Hopefully these work a little bit better. No sound? So can you hear me, or is it just you couldn't hear the caller, or what was the situation? Neither. Wow. Okay. Well, I will always summarize what the callers, say when they call in. Is it? Can you hear? Speaking to the mic a little bit.
Are you able to hear my feed?
I am.
That's better.
Okay. I think we're back on track. Yay! Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. So moving right along, we were basically talking about the census and how important that is, and so we kind of moved from that. And hopefully, we answered the caller's question. Other than signing up, being counted, registering to vote, we kind of have to trust the system that they're going to do their job and make sure that we are counted and they're putting in the right numbers and this right statistical data.
I was raised more of a military style in my household. I had a dad that was in the Army and came through Tuskegee and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's trust and verify.
Oh, yes.
Trust and verify.
Trust and verify. I think that was a great quote that, was it President Bush had? I think it was. And we use that quite a lot around my household as well. So I understand where you're going with that. So moving on into some other issues, we've talked about the socioeconomic division. We talked a little bit about access. We've talked a little bit about how those monies will be divided once they are calculated correctly and then allocated to the different communities around. So you were actually involved on the local, state, and somewhat of the national level as well. So can you tell me what you do on the local level over in St. Petersburg? Really, housing is an issue for everyone everywhere across the nation, but we are more focused on St. Petersburg today because that's where you put a lot of your energies and focus. How does that impact not only just the immediate Southside community, but the county as a whole? And how does the national and state level play into what goes on the local level, so they can understand how the census and the voting and the precincts and allocated monies come together to affect and impact them on the local level, but you have to be counted on the federal level?
I came here from California most recently.
Okay.
I grew up in Indiana, one of the farming parts of this country, and my involvement started then.
Okay.
As a small child, parents, particularly my dad and his father, were very active in politics. And they were active from the standpoint of local precincts to make sure that people, A, were registered to vote, that they in fact did vote, and that their votes were counted. They made sure that the neighborhood knew about the candidates for office, not what they said so much as what their journey to that candidacy said about them. and they stayed engaged. They stayed woke. It was called something different back in the day, but the principle remained the same. To not only be involved and be aware of those issues, but also to make sure that those issues were being carried forward in terms of specific acts of individuals, acts in terms of law, and the follow-up for that was absolutely critical. At that point, it was called urban renewal, it being economic development, affordable housing, and that kind of thing. And it went through a number of iterations, and now it's more politely referred to as revitalization efforts. And the revitalization efforts are essentially very little difference between the two, other than terminology. It is to provide for a higher quality of life for people, to have people have a clean, safe, and affordable environment, to do it in a way that is sustainable for the people providing those facilities and also for the people that live in them. Nothing like having it and losing it. Nothing quite like that. So what we have to do is to have a talent base that's coming up through well-informed and engaged people, and then the housing for them is also of critical importance.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Issues and Answers.
My name is Gil Sampson. I didn't come from a very rich family, and so paying for college would have been very tough. I don't know if I would have been able to go to the college that I went to, and then I don't know if I would have gotten into the career that I am in. So I think Bright Futures has done a lot to shape my life. Got a job as a structural engineer, and I design residential buildings, commercial buildings all over the United States. Because of Bright Futures, I was able to go to college. You know, so many kids just don't even ever get that opportunity, and to be able to do it and not have any debt when I graduated is amazing, and it was all thanks to Bright Futures.
Florida has created more than 1 million jobs in only 5 years, and a great education connects our students to these exciting opportunities. That's why the Florida Lottery has funded Bright Futures scholarships to help over 725,000 students attend college. Because every play is for education. The Florida Lottery. Just imagine.
Hey, this is Miss K with K's Kitchen, where we're cooking Chicago-style fried chicken and fish with the authentic Chicago-style mouth sauce. Come check us out at our new restaurant located at 3320 East Osborne Avenue in the Jackson Heights area. We have a brand new menu which includes whole wings, catfish, pizza puffs, and much more. Call us at 813-368-5196. Again, that number is 813-368-5196. See you soon.
Hey, this is Tampa Bay Tammy. Don't forget to pick up your copy of In Touch News.
And welcome back to Issues and Answers. Again, I'm Gina Oguntade, guest hosting for Mr. Dale Green today. And in studio, we have with us Attorney Michelle Ligon. Before we went to break, we were talking about some very important issues. However, I want to get back to the access, because this show is about basically the issues and giving the answers to the citizens who will be most affected. So can we get back to talking about accessibility and all the different things that go into making affordable housing accessible to the everyday citizen?
Absolutely. I think that's of critical importance, especially in these times. When I moved here from California, I was certainly well matured in the process of politics, development, the practice of law, as well as the political connotations that come with all of that. But to become really engaged is what's important here. There are a number of committee appointments and commission appointments that are done through the offices of the mayor, through the city council, and through other divisions, whether it's the district schools or the state government or whatever. And I think knowing what those opportunities are is very, very critically important, and actually getting involved. I sat on and chaired the Historic Preservation Commission in St. Petersburg. Who knew that in 2019 it would be such a vital issue, one of constant conversation and of necessity in terms of doing this particular type of project. I also sat on the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission determines what type of zoning or what type of building, if you will, and the rules for it is being done in certain areas. It's very, very important, because when you look at it, The quality of life is about access. It's about accessing certain types of resources. It's about access to certain types of information. And all of that is of critical importance. It's very easy to sit back and talk about what someone else is or is not doing, what they did right versus what they did wrong. But it's a little bit of a different story if you're actually engaged. So when I speak of access, I'm talking about literally being engaged. Understand and know what you're doing. Going to law school for me was simply a stepping stone. I never really wanted to be a lawyer, except I liked the briefcase thing. That was kind of.
You like briefing cases?
I like.
Okay.
No, briefcases.
Oh, briefcases. Okay.
Another kind of purse, but a purse just the same. I enjoyed that. What I didn't really enjoy was the knockdown, drag out of litigation, and I did that when I first got out of law school. Got it out of my system pretty early. But what I have always had a passion for is building. Daddy's girl used to travel around with my dad on the weekends to look at rental properties, to look at things to buy, things to build, things to improve, and things to let for people in need. And that's always been a part of my fabric. And I would encourage people to look at the opportunities, not just for what someone else can do, but what you can do. If you look at a neighborhood, it's a combination of things that are provided for that neighborhood through infrastructure. It's also very much the flavor of the people who live there, who inhabit the buildings, who take care of the landscaping, and how it looks determines how you feel. When you put on a handsome suit or you put on a pretty dress, it does something for the way you feel about yourself, and it does something for the way people perceive you without having exchanged a single word. Housing is no different. I think to the extent that we can provide positive housing environments for people, their likelihood of successful lives is demonstrably improved. And that's what I'm encouraging people to do. Don't look at it as to whether or not you can build a high rise or not, so much as you look at it as whether you can provide housing for so much as one person. Can you improve that housing for a single person? We're a diverse community. We are all different ages, all different ethnicities. Our capabilities in terms of living on our own varies from place to place, and one of the organizations that I worked with for a number of years was Goodwill Industries Suncoast. And very big part of that process is to find housing for people that have various types of challenges. And I'm very pleased to have been part of the boards that had transitional housing for returning offenders into the community. Very, very important to provide adequate housing, safe, and to do it in an environment that allows them to grow and nurture and reassimilate back into society. Warehousing people serves no beneficial purpose other than safety, but it doesn't propel us as a society of people. So it's important not just to accept the fact that the people do return, and you need to have some place for them to return to safely that's conducive to their assimilation into the societies that they're being returned to. Very, very important. So I would encourage everyone to become more informed of how things are structured. How do you get a house from idea to the ground? And how do you plumb it? How do you provide electricity to it? All of those things are not just important from a knowledge for personal sake, but it's also a knowledge for neighborhoods, which in turn create cities, which in turn create areas of the country. And each area of this country has its own flavor, even still. You get the Southern drawl, or you can talk about cars and parties in Boston, that sort of thing. But the housing goes along with it hand in hand. If a person is comfortable and safe at home, 9 times out of 10, they'll bring that confidence into the workplace. They'll bring it with them. And we all benefit when people have a sense of comfort, when we're well informed, when we're given opportunities, when we take opportunities or create opportunities to grow as individuals and grow as communities. And that's what this is really all about. I would encourage people who have not taken advantage of learning how the money flows to learn how it flows. People who are not familiar with how neighborhood patterns are being developed should become familiar with them. And as I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite things was historic preservation. I've always been a fan of it and quite proud of some of the things that we were able to achieve on the St. Petersburg side of the Bay as well as on the Tampa side. Historic Roser Park, we designated an entire neighborhood, got it on the historic registry.
It's wonderful.
And so the flavor of that neighborhood has been allowed to carry forward for hundreds of years. The same thing is being done in terms of not just neighborhood preservation, but also individual property preservation. So as you see all the development go along in the downtown areas of Tampa, the same thing in St. Petersburg, we've worked very, very hard to preserve some of that old flavor. And by old flavor, not old in the sense of outdated, so much as old as in sustainable. It's still here. It still serves a beneficial purpose, and it still sets the tone of our community. And I think it's very, very important. It's very important for people from all aspects, not just the very wealthy, certainly not just the very poor, and poor in terms of resources, as in financial resources, is not the same as being poor in spirit. Um, Having a sense of where you and people like you have come from is important for establishing stability in the platform on which you stand right now today, and it improves and enhances your ability to see forward with sustainable plans and to do it in a way that takes everyone's interest, everyone's needs, everyone's desires into consideration, and we can do it profitably. Also, been working on the inclusion of disadvantaged business enterprises in all of the development that's going on. It's very easy to get the same old guys who've been used to doing it because they're the deal makers, the movers, the shakers, getting it done. Guess what? There are other people who bring things to the table, and we're very proud of some of the projects that we've been able to do in the Tampa area, as well as St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Dunedin, Sarasota, Bradenton, and Palmetto area as well. And so it's very, very important that you show up and speak up. Let people know what your capabilities are. Let them know what your interests are and participate. Don't just stay awake and know what's going on. Be a part of making it go on.
Very, very, very well put and well said. For those of y'all who still want to participate, you can call in at 813-444-9588. Again, that's area code 813-444-9588. To touch back on some of the topics that you mentioned earlier, you want to basically look at access from a more interactive standpoint and not just knowing how I can get this, how I can get that, where do I sign up for that, but becoming informed and actually becoming an active participant as part of your own destiny. And I think that's very important for a lot of our citizens to understand. And even if you're not one of the people who may receive some of the benefits of what public housing is supposed to do, you have friends, families, cousins, because as a whole, every community actually impacts every other community. You know, your property taxes based on who bought what down the street, what their renovations may be, and who's moving in, are they renting, are they, owning, all of that comes into play, or the zoning changes that might come about. Is your community 2 blocks over now going to become commercial? Is it going to become somewhat mixed commercial resident? All those things take effect on where your neighborhood looks like and how financially you'll be impacted as well on down the way. Also, you talked about the beauty of the historical part of our cities. And that's very important. I'm a big history buff. I think I mentioned that last week as well. But looking at some of the older buildings that we have that are still sustainable, even without some of the help that the Preservation Society probably would afford them, like the Don Cesar, the Vinoy, and some of the other places over here in Tampa as well. I don't want to call any names. I might make a mistake again. Not as familiar with Tampa as I am with St. Petersburg. But those are beautiful. I think the Vinoy turns 100 in about 2 years. So I'm sure there's going to be a big gear up and lead into that. But people don't understand also how that can impact your community, because it may bring in some more tourism. Also, these buildings that are here, you can get help to restore them. A lot of people have basically lost touch, given up, forgot about a lot of the places. I can't remember the exact name right now, so you all forgive me. But if anyone knows, you can call in and give me the name of that. But there was a building over here that was very instrumental in housing a lot of our political and civil rights leaders back in the early days during segregation. A lot of musicians and people came through who stayed at the house. It was kind of a boarding house, and it was torn down. But USF did come in and do like a 3D, approach to preserving everything that it was, so you can still virtually look at what that building was, what it served, who was there, and the great historical events that took place there. And so that's wonderful that we can see it 3D virtually. But how about I want to go see it, touch it, smell it, walk on the same steps that other people have walked in. So those dollars, probably from some of the historical preservation societies in different communities, can help preserve those so they don't go into being only a virtual reality. And then also you talked about comfort and safety and how that's the foundation of what most people need, especially going back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I remember that from school, being a psychology major, that was drilled in a lot to us. So most people do thrive and do well when you have a sense of comfort and safety. I remember from my days of being a school teacher, if a child hadn't eaten breakfast or they hadn't slept late, hadn't slept, well that night before because of sirens or fighting, or there's a drip or a leak, or they were cold because the heat wasn't working, or they're all shoved into, a 2-room apartment and you have 3 or 4 other brothers and sisters sleeping with you in the same bed, that really takes a toll on how they perform in school the next day. So some of these things that we're talking about goes all the way across generations. You talked about some of our senior population. I also mentioned last week how a lot of the older rent control places in St. Petersburg have changed. So we can talk a little more about that as we come back from break. Again, this is Issues and the Answers. Please stay tuned and we'll be right back.
So believe we hunted down 813-248-6300. Everything gon' be okay. Call Ricky, he coming. He taking care of state of Florida. Grab a pen of sundown. 184-361-RICK. That's 184-361-425. Never word from the point forward, just recline. Just ask Ricky, plus your boy statewide. Just in case you missed it, I'ma tell you one more time. 184-361-RICK. Call Ricky, ask Ricky is a legal medical referral service. The doctors and lawyers are not network or trained in handling auto injury claims and giving you the best medical treatment and recovery. Dial 1-844-361-RICK. That's 1-844-361-7425. Ricky. Ask Ricky.
Hey, this is Miss K with K's Kitchen, where we're cooking Chicago-style fried chicken and fish with the authentic Chicago-style mouth sauce. Come check us out at our new restaurant located at 3320 East Osborne Avenue in the Jackson Heights area. We have a brand new menu which includes whole wings, catfish, pizza puffs, and much more. Call us at 813-368-5196. Again, that number is 813-368-5196. See you soon.
Welcome back to Issues and the Answers. And on today's show, again, we have Attorney Michelle Ligon with us. And just before the break, we were talking about some of the issues that affordable housing directly impacts. And I was giving some insight a little bit about when I was a teacher and how a child coming to school would be greatly impacted by their night before sleep or the lack of thereof, and how housing plays into that, as well as going into talking about our senior population and how a lot of the high rises that used to be rent controlled, senior populations, 55 plus, where are they going? Because they've turned a lot of those into urban flats, lofts, and you talked about high rises and condos. And so if they're not living in those particular apartments or in those different buildings, where are they going now? So that also plays into senior displacement in the affordable housing. So can we expound a little bit on that and how we're trying to place them, or where are they going, or have they even taken that into consideration? You can't take people who are on fixed incomes and have been used to paying, I don't know how much it is a month, but I'm sure it's a lot less than what those high rises now are going to be charging for rent. How does that play into, and where do they go to look for help or access to what affordable housing would look like for them?
Where they go to look for help is people like you.
Okay.
Your age group, people like me, my age group, and concerned citizens at all ages from all aspects of the community. It's about becoming engaged, be informed, be engaged, and then be accountable. The term that's being bandied about now, probably in a million different ways, is gentrification. It's moving one category of residents out for the access of another category. And typically it's based on a number of markers, not the least of which most people think it's about race. A lot of people think it's about money. A lot of people think it's just about how we want to live. If we want to live a more urban style with multifamily housing, or if we want to live a more rural style in single family housing. The fact of the matter is simply this in the Tampa Bay area, however, is that we have a limited amount of land space, and we've got to become smarter about how we're using it, and we have to do that right now. Affordable housing is not something that we can push off, and as I mentioned before, affordable housing touches the ranks of people that we don't necessarily perceive as being in need. When you're talking about a school teacher, you're talking about a police officer, a fireman, if you're talking about people who own their own small mom and pop type of business, that's who's paying 120% of income if they can. And most of them are looking at going down as low as 80%. The majority of the affordable housing that's being built right now is based on an 80% formula. And that formula allows the developers to come in, put up a quality product that's market competitive, and to do it in a way that's cost efficient. And by cost efficient, you've got to be able to recover your investment in that development over a stated number of years. And in being able to do that, you can then begin to reinvest monies in maintaining it over the longer term or in additional properties. We've got to get smarter about this. There's a program called Rental Assistance Demonstration that's being bandied about by HUD and throughout various communities across the country. What RAD does is allows public housing authorities essentially to compete on the same level as the private sector in terms of profitability. You think, well, they always want to talk about money and it's always about grabbing that dollar. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. It's about grabbing that dollar, but not just for the sake of grabbing the dollar. That dollar allows us to build more and better quality housing for those people who are outside. Most of the demographics that you hear about in terms of reports are of people that really don't match what public housing used to do, which is basically 60% down to zero income. We're not building pretty high rises to accommodate that need. We not only have a burgeoning population in that area, we also have a burgeoning population with people who have no income that are on the street. And it's not just older, creepy people. There are children who live in cars, children and their families who are living in the woods around the highways and byways that we all travel every single day. And we act like they're not here in terms of our planning processes. Well, no can do. Many of our council members are actively engaged in trying to deal with that problem, but they've got to deal with it with the same dynamic as building affordable housing at the highest level. And they've got to do it in a way that's not just something you can throw up, but something that's sustainable over time. We live in a unique area. Storms come through here on the regular. They come through here and they cause damage. We also have a very bright and hot sun, particularly today. We have a lot of water. We got Tampa Bay, we got the Gulf of Mexico, and a whole lot of streams that we're used to in the middle. And as a result of that, we're required to do a certain type of construction in this area. And it's not cheap. We've gone through and been pummeled by storms. The cost of building material has gone up exponentially over the past several years. And by several years, I'm talking about all the way back to Hurricane Andrew. And the building codes that we have to adhere to now just to make sure that these buildings are sustainable through a storm, it's tremendous. Not only are we dealing with cinder block as opposed to wood these days, we're building with poured core cinder block with rebar in it. Which means you got a cinder block, you got a piece of iron that's stuffed in the middle of it, and then cement is poured around that to withstand the winds that we're having to deal with. And that brings up another topic, global warming. Everybody laughed at Al Gore, but boy, it's pretty hot today. And it's pretty moist today as well. And we've got to do the type of building materials that can sustain us with those types of variables involved. Learn about that. Learn about what types of materials are in the housing that you're living in. One of the challenges that we face in terms of being able to preserve and stay hold of older properties is that many of them in this part of the country are built from wood. And as a result of the type of construction that worked for us 100 years ago, and in the case of Jordan Poor, 80 years ago, it just doesn't work right now. And as a result of that, we're got to find places that are safe and affordable. So with that, you've got to be engaged and involved to understand what it now takes to build quality housing. And the fact that we've got to do it on the same land space, essentially, that was here then, is another challenge. One of the things that I found most perplexing as I was sitting on the planning board over in St. Petersburg was to look at recovered land. When you look at the shoreline, if you're in a plane coming in, it's pretty easy to see. But if you're on the ground level, not so much. But the shoreline is increasing in some areas and decreasing in other areas. In some areas, it's been recovered, meaning that the level of the water has recessed enough to the point where we can actually do construction on it. And so we are. And we're building on lands that was not buildable even 50 years ago. And as a result of that, the type of building that we're doing is markedly different. And it's not cheap.
I can imagine that.
Absolutely. So what we have to do is to find a way to get more living space per square foot. And we have no time to sit back and pontificate about how we need creativity to be brought to the table. So even if you're not a doctor, lawyer, or an Indian chief, you may have an idea of how to make livability issues more palatable, more fiscally approachable, more feasible for us. And we've got to do that right now. So don't hesitate. There are community awareness, community commissions being established all over the Bay Area. Please come, add your input. It's very, very important because it's not only going to affect the people in that room, it affects the entire landscape of this area. I want to get back on gentrification, if I may, for a minute.
Sure.
And I'm speaking very clearly from the heart and the head of Michelle, as opposed to the number of clients that I represent. Gentrification, meaning moving one group of dwellers out and another one in, doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing unless it's only a one-sided equation. If you're moving somebody out, you've got to determine that where you're moving them to has at least as good, if not better, than where they are. And moving people for the sake of moving people is not okay. It never has been. There has never been a one-size-fits-all solution to housing, certainly in housing patterns. Gentrification has been bad. It's been a bad, bad thing.
Yes, I agree with you totally on that.
But it can be improved if we look at it intelligently. There may be areas where we should not still be living. We found, in terms of a lot of the EPA activity that was going on in the 80s, and it's still going on right now, that maybe we weren't as responsible as we should have about different types of pollutants. And so people that are living in those areas need to be relocated. That's gentrification too. But guess what? Moving for something better is acceptable. Moving for the sake of moving, not so much, unless you can show tangible improvement in the quality of life of the people that you're moving and a tangible improvement for the people that you're moving into that area. There are factors beside just flood stage that we have to look at. We also have to look at whether or not the land itself is polluted. We have to look at the air and the air quality. Over in St. Petersburg, we have some major problems in terms of partially treated or untreated sewage being dropped in the bay, and it's caused market challenges for us over there. So that committee that is addressing those needs has to be comprised of people who actually live there. When you wake up and you've paid $1 million for a piece of property that has big blooming blue algae problems around it, it's not quite the same, doesn't give you the same warm and fuzzy feeling. No. And it's not something we can afford to forestall, because it's not just affecting the sea, it's affecting those of us that are breathing the air that touches the sea. It's affecting those of us that feed off of the fishes in the sea. So it's an issue that is very, very important. So when you think of gentrification next time, think of it in the macro.
Okay.
Who are we moving? Why is it going to be better?
Let's put a pin in that right there and take a quick break. Okay, thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Jean Oguntade, in for Mr. Dale Green. And on Issues and Answers, if you stay tuned, though, we might come back with a part 2. So we thank you for tuning in today. Thank you very much.
My name is Gil Sampson. I didn't come from a very rich family, and so paying for college would have been very tough. I don't know if I would have been able to go to the college that I went to, and then I don't know if I would have gotten into the career that I am in. So I think Bright Futures has done a lot to shape my life. Got a job as a structural engineer, and I design residential buildings, commercial buildings all over the United States. Because of Bright Futures, I was able to go to college. You know, so many kids just don't even ever get that opportunity, and to be able to do it and not have any debt when I graduated is amazing, and it was all thanks to Bright Futures.
Florida has created more than 1 million jobs in only 5 years, and a great education connects our students to these exciting opportunities. That's why the Florida Lottery has funded Bright Futures scholarships to help over 725,000 students attend college. Because every play is for education. The Florida Lottery. Just imagine.
Hi, this is Dale Day. Join me every Monday at 7 p.m. for Jazz at Miss Connie's house, bringing you the smoothest jazz and the coolest guests right here on In Touch Radio.
For somewhat of an encore presentation. We had such a wonderful time discussing all those great topics earlier. For those of y'all who are still tuned in with us, let's give that call-in number again if you want to call in and be a part of the show. It's area code 813-444-9588. Again, area code 813-444-9588. So before the end of the last show, we were talking about a couple of topics I want to revisit. One being the interactive accessibility and access, and how people need to take part of that. And moving from that, we kind of went into talking about what gentrification looks like, what it is it good, is it bad, and how it doesn't always have to be bad. It usually does get a negative connotation attached to it. However, you explain how it can be good. And I think we probably have seen more bad examples of that than we've seen good. But going also with the gentrification topic, that brings into the conversation another aspect, where if you move them somewhere else, and the space limitation issue, that also impacts our commute and our roads and our travel, and the slow go, no go of the early morning rush hour and late evening, and how that also can impact your life, add another hour, pollutants, stress, all of those type of things, parents trying to pick up children from school, and just meet all the demands of what life brings to you. So this aspect of gentrification, community building, impacts everything. And so when someone gets upset about the interstate or another highway coming through their neighborhood, or having to basically have a lot more travel through your neighborhood, that also is a great impact that people need to think about. So they need to become more involved and basically look at it from, like you said, a macro standpoint. Can you also expound a little bit about the disadvantaged business entities and how they have kind of been somewhat of a status quo for a long time, and you and a lot of other people are moving to get it becoming more diverse? So let's talk about that a little bit, and then I'll go into some other issues that you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for reminding me about the disadvantaged business enterprises and getting involved. One of the things that was pointed out in some of the research that we were doing for the community, it revealed the fact that in prior years, participation from disadvantaged business enterprise. First of all, let me take a moment and digress. I'm assuming that everybody knows what those are. These are businesses that are owned by women and representatives of various cultural and racial groups, African American, Hispanic, Indian, Asian, women-owned businesses. And these are businesses that have been historically left out of the building that we've been talking about, the development that we've been talking about, whether it's a road or bridge or a building, or whether it's an improvement of something that's in existence. These businesses have been purposefully aced out of the game because they're smaller and they don't have the resources to go out and market and compete on these levels. So there are very purposeful programs that are being put together at virtually all levels. City of Tampa, City of St. Petersburg, Clearwater, a number of other communities are all making a purposeful effort to be inclusive of smaller businesses. There are more smaller businesses than there are larger businesses. And so getting a piece of that pie can make the difference in the fabric of a particular community, the sustainability of that community. So I would encourage you to be in touch with the economic development departments in your cities, be in touch with Pinellas County, with Hillsborough County, and surrounding counties as well to find out what type of utilization statistics they have. Are you hiring folks that look like me to get it done? And if you're not, what are you doing to find me? And what am I doing to find you? What can I do to find you to participate? And once the registry is established, a lot of forms to fill out. It's government, and so we do forms.
Red tape.
Red tape, but you can sometimes make it pink and green tape.
Amen to that.
All right, shout out to the SORR. And I better throw some red and white in there and some blue and gold and everybody else
Our
that's
half
in the
sisters.
mix.
Our half sisters.
Okay. We'll stop and not digress on that. But a number of Greek organizations are facilitating activities to have the disadvantaged business enterprise, SORRs, and brothers involved in activities. And as a result of that, we're seeing some improvement. I know that the St. Petersburg Housing Authority has made a purposeful effort to do Make Ready or readiness training for disadvantaged business enterprises because we're insisting upon participation in these developments. There's nothing like building something that you're going to live in yourself. And there's nothing quite like the financial stability that comes from allowing local builders, local suppliers, local vendors to participate in these projects. We, as opposed to bringing someone from another part of the country to participate, we can do it ourselves, and we're working very hard to make that happen. There's a full division that's been set up in both counties, full division that's been set up in Tampa and St. Petersburg to precisely take care of those interests. So with that, if you are a business owner, get involved. Call the city, call the county, and find out how you can get on the registry and how you can participate. You'll probably see me. I'm one of those. Oh, she's back.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm one of those.
But we need you. We need more of you.
Done. Consider it done. Also, Section 3 participation with housing authorities. There are a number of services and products that are needed by housing authorities, and you can register with the housing authority to participate. The one thing that we cannot afford to do as people, no matter age, no matter color, no matter what your religious preferences are or any other kind of preference that you may have, getting involved locally is absolutely critical at this point in time. We're growing, and the only way that you can impact how we are growing in terms of where is to define where we're going. And that's towards inclusion, and that's very, very important right now. And mine need not be the only voice, and it certainly isn't. There are a number of organizations throughout the Tampa Bay area that are proactively working to change that paradigm. And believe me, it's not a minute too soon, because what we're doing now in 2019 will be a factor in 20 years, in 30 years. And if we are fortunate, as we have been with some of the buildings, older buildings in this community, buildings that are 80 and 100 years old now will still be sustainable. I wanted to talk about how to get involved.
Please do.
Every community has in progress the development of economic overlays, the development of development zones, and the design and development of those zones is a function of the input of the populace. Yes, there are architects and engineers and that kind of thing, but guess what? They're public meetings. So you can go, you can contribute what your thoughts and ideas are and perceptions are in the public comment sections. I would encourage you to come out. Don't sit back. Don't sit this one out. Get in. Get involved. Get yourself prepared. There are lots of learning opportunities. This is one area where we have a lot of institutions that are going through changes. I remember working in Hillsborough County with the district schools to improve the technical training program and to do it in a way that was partnering with local businesses. So literally you had an opportunity to do cooperative training before you completed your coursework. And as a result of that, you were job ready when you came out the door. That's a way of strengthening this community. It gives people employability skills. It makes sure that these businesses have people to hire
and train for their particular end of the business enterprise, and it does it in a way that allows us to stand strong as a community. If I'm doing well and you're not, we're not in good shape. And that attitude is something that we kind of lost sight of a little bit. But you can get involved. You can be engaged. And guess what? They're not age distinct. You can get involved in Brewster and Irwin and P-TECH and all of these technical training programs to do everything from learning how to make a cupcake in big numbers to how to build a building, to how to drive an 18-wheeler, to how to teach, how to do cosmetics, all kinds of things, all kinds of opportunities. We're also a community that has a lot of healthcare needs. So getting in and retraining, maybe you've been involved in a particular line of work and your career is maybe not going, or maybe you've gotten stale on it, or maybe you just want to try something different. Go back and enjoy some of the technical training that's available. Scholarships are available to you. Many employers will pay you for having successfully completed classes. Take advantage of those opportunities. Don't sit back and wait to see if somebody else did it. You do it and be involved. Be a contributor. I would suggest to you that the type of growth that we're experiencing in the Tampa Bay area is going to continue to be very dynamic for a long period of time. We're growing very fast in numbers. Therefore, our needs are growing fast and they are diverse. So there's room for everybody. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
Don't shoulda, coulda, woulda. I understand that. Yes, we are growing exponentially, and it's amazing. I've been in and out of the city, in the state, residing different places. And when I come back each time, I'm like, wow, okay, look at St. Pete, look at Tampa. Where did that come from? And so I'm amazed and pleased as well. But we are growing exponentially, and we have to get on top of it now. With the co-op program you mentioned, that is very important. I mean, they're doing some of that right here at In Touch. I was speaking to one of the interns as we came in and got ready for the show, and she seems to be learning a lot and enjoying her experience here. So that's important. And also, people need to understand that what you once would have received out of getting a college education is no longer the same story. A lot of debt, a lot of loans, great experiences, parties and pledging and all those things are fun. But a lot of people are going into the more trade aspect of a profession. And I had a plumber bill not too long ago, and I looked at that. I was like, whoa, maybe I made the wrong career path. That wasn't quite what I wanted to do, of course, but you're right. The non-college-based professions now, where you can go maybe get a training for 6 to 8 weeks. Some of them take longer as a year because there's some very precise, detailed information and training that you need to receive. But you can make a very, very, very nice living off of what you can get at some of the technical colleges now.
Absolutely. I want to encourage people to take advantage of that. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of arm twisting and tap dancing as well to get those programs where they needed to be, but certainly they are providing the type of opportunities that will allow our communities to be sustainable. Don't be afraid. The question you don't ask is maybe the source of the information you need to take that next step. So don't be afraid to do it. Everybody doesn't have to be a doctor, lawyer, or Indian chief. I highly recommend it. It served me well. Going to law school for me was, like I said, a platform. It helped me to think and reason and be able to communicate in writing and to be able to communicate verbally in a manner that made me competitive. But it made me competitive yesterday to be Barbie the Builder. Mm. Okay. And tomorrow it's going to make me competitive to be on a community panel. So it afforded me a diverse life experience, and it afforded me that opportunity that we all quest, we all want, we strive for, is to be able to make our own decisions, to determine the quality of our own individual life, and to do it in a way that's of value, not just to ourselves, but to our entire communities. So get up, get in, stay woke, and get her done.
That's my line, too. I love that. Yes, I can totally agree with you with that law school. I remember going into it, I was like, do I really want to do this? And then on my way out towards graduation, you look at the world in a whole new perspective. And I can remember my torts teacher first year saying, you'll never see the world the same again. And she was absolutely right, And so that platform that you get from your law school training, it basically does help you to see everything in a macro and a micro perspective, read between the lines, above the line, below the line, before and after the line, and just have a more analytical approach to what is really going on around you and being able to see what's coming down the line as well. So I understand that, and I have greatly enjoyed you today. Oh, wow, you're just a wealth of information. I sit under your tutelage all the time, and I just enjoy it. I can't get enough of you. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but right after the break, we'll be coming back to see and close out the show.
This is Dale Day. Join me every Monday at 7 p.m. for Jazz at Miss Connie's house, bringing you the smoothest jazz and the coolest guests right here on In Touch Radio.
Hi, this is Dr. Veronica Walters, also known as Dr. V, the head of school at the Walters Academy for Entrepreneurship, a place that we like to call The Way, where we're educating today's youthpreneurs to be tomorrow's billionaires through social entrepreneurship. Do you have a student who's bored, frustrated, gifted, inquisitive, creative, business-minded? Then maybe you need to check The Way out. Listen, we have an educational platform that allows for individualized instruction. It's strength-based, project-based, and designed to help your student become the absolute best they can while starting their own business and being an entrepreneur. If you're looking for something different and you need to find a more excellent way, then you need to visit us at The Way. That's The Way, www.thewaetampa.org. Or you can call us at 813-603-7923. We look forward to showing your student a more excellent way at The Way.
Been in a car crash? Call Ricky. Don't know what to do? Ask Ricky. We will connect you with a lawyer and doctor experienced in auto accident injuries. Call Ricky at 844-361-7425. After an auto accident, you have 14 days to seek medical attention. You may be in pain, so call Ricky, ask Ricky for your best options. 844-361-7425. Call Ricky, ask Ricky is a legal and medical referral service. The lawyers in our network pay to receive referrals.
We want to welcome everyone back to Issues and the Answers. And as we get ready to close out the show, we're going to kind of summarize some things and basically give everyone some information that I think will be of a great benefit to them. So again, we have Attorney Michelle Ligon in the studio today with us for today's show. So going back to this topic and concern of accessibility for the citizen, we want to kind of dive into how do you basically chop that up and make it a more effective and efficient plan going forward. So if we can kind of expound on the information, how do we start, where do we go, how do we become engaged, and talk a little bit about sustainability of keeping everything on an even playing field moving forward.
Thanks, Gene. And I really want to also reach out to the proprietors of In Touch News. Tammy and Daryl, thank you so much for providing this platform to the community. I think it's absolutely essential to enhancing the quality of life that we all aspire to live here. And with that, I'd like to share something that wakes me up every day and validates how I spend it. And that's to be able to build my own best life. Choices. That's what the game is. It's about choices, being able to decide how, where you live, being able to decide the quality of life in a particular home, in a particular part of the community. Put yourself in a position to get those choices and to do it in a way that is sustainable. Like I said, getting it and losing it is not a good thing unless you're getting it to lose it for purposes of something better. And that's the call. So get involved. Contact your city offices. If you don't know the number for the city that you live in, that's one of the first things that you need to do. I'll bet you'll be able to find it on your water bill, on your sewer bill. I bet you'll be able to find it in terms of your utilities company, and utilities company can give you that connecting information, whether it's cable TV or whether it's your electric service. All utilities roll up to the same platform. If you need to know more about how those utilities work, they can share that with you. Provide yourself a pathway to something better. Live your best life right now by becoming informed. And once you're informed, Find your passion. Find something you enjoy doing, something that you're good at. We're all born and created for a particular purpose. Many of us don't find it right away, but when we do find it, boy, we're really good at it. And we do it better than anything else. So I would encourage you, no matter what age you are, find your passion today and then pursue it. Find out who to call, where to call. Start with something very fundamental. If it is about how you're living, where you're living, all those kinds of things, call those numbers. You will get to the place that you've got to. Call the educational institutions. There's one literally on every corner in this particular area of the state and this particular part of the country. Find out how to do what you need to have done. That could be the start of your business. Find out if you have a plumbing problem, what does it take to become a plumber? How much do they make?
A lot.
Especially when it's raining, right?
Yes.
Find out what you're good at and go after it. Don't be deterred by somebody doing it well already. That doesn't have anything to do with your creativity. That doesn't have anything to do with your talent, the passion that you bring to that opportunity. Get engaged and then learn what is supposed to be done and use that as the basis for accountability. Demand and command the best so that you can live your best life now.
That's wonderful. I mean, I don't know what to say. I just sit here and listen to you. I've been taking notes and mental notes as well, and I have some work to do myself. So I have just enjoyed you today. I hope you have enjoyed your experience as well. We want to thank Mr. Johnson as well for giving us this extra time. What you had to give to the people was just, it was priceless. So I thank you for coming out today. I know you're a busy lady, so we got to get you back to all those different hats you wear and to working out there in the community. But again, I want to thank you so much for coming in, helping me out with the show today, and give a kudos to Stephen too, keeping us on time and making sure that we hit all our breaks. So for those of you out there, she's giving you a charge, and we ask that you go ahead and you take that and personally get involved and figure out what you need to do to make this life better for you and your community. So as she said in that song that we like to hear on the radio, let's live our best lives. We want to thank everyone for tuning in today to Issues and the Answers. Again, I'm Jean Oguntade, and I'm filling in as guest host for Mr. Dale Green upon his return to us very soon. Have a wonderful week, and thank you again for tuning in.